Right, I think we found where the water's going. We're failing a leak down test on number 3. When I pulled the plug out, it was wet, and this is what we've got here. So all the other cylinders are good, but you know what? It's just got standard Felpro gaskets. I think it's time for this old girl to have an upgrade. Hello from Valley Grunt Performance. This is James's 318 stroker VJ station wagon. We've had a bit of an issue. James got the car in for us to have a look at because he wasn't happy with the way it drove, and every time he took it for a drive it would come back on a trailer. Little did we know this was the problem.
What's
As you can
this?
see here, this is a head gasket. So what had happened to the head gasket is it had blown out into the valley.
This is number 3 cylinder.
Yes, but it's very interesting. It did number 3 cylinder as well as it did number 6 cylinder. So
If you look in here, we've got one that's washed,
yep,
and if I go around the other side, well, the number 6 doesn't look as washed.
no, it's not as washed, but number
So-
6 is pushed. You can see that the gasket's pushed.
Yeah,
So
did the same thing.
yeah, not as far, but it's pushed.
So that was going to get as bad as number 3.
It was going to get as bad as number 3. But anyway, so this is what happens. Look, normally you can run a Felpro gasket with a aluminium head and it's not a problem. The problem is though, once you start getting above 400 horsepower, this can happen. All it takes is say, as an example, a little tiny spark of detonation and it'll just push that gasket right through into the valley like this. So detonation can be avoided by many things, obviously engine timing and stuff like that, but the problem is when you've got an engine that's so powerful, all it takes is for just a flash of detonation and it'll just push the gasket into an egg.
Right, so
So the cure to this issue is Cometic head gaskets.
if you pull one of these out,
So
and we'll have a look at the difference between the Cometics and the Felpro standard gaskets, which work just fine with cast heads,
so
but not so good with the aluminium heads and
These-
higher horsepower.
yeah, that's right. I don't need that. So we're not sponsored through Cometic, but anyway,
This is what we use.
this is what we use. So it's not like I'm advertising for Cometic. I just think it's a good product. So that is what the gasket looks like.
Which is completely different to the
Yeah.
Felpro. So if we do a side by side,
It's a multi-layer. So this is like a composite. It has little sheets of aluminium in between it, and then a metal fire ring that goes around. These don't have a fire ring as such. These are good for naturally aspirated and some boosted applications. Either that, or if you really want to chase a serious boost, you've got to run a copper head gasket.
so I don't know if you can hear it, but you can hear the layers. So what happens is once these go on, each layer is an extra surface area of sealing, basically,
Yes.
and strength.
But also too, it has got a film of paint, like a painted film that goes in between these surfaces, which help seal it as well.
if I
So
can
if you
see
have
it.
a look inside, you can see it's multi-layer,
Yeah.
like that. But they actually do seal. They have a tiny little bit of sealer already on them. So you don't paint the surfaces or anything like this, but you have to machine the cylinder head a little bit differently to how it will be machined for a gasket like this. So it has to have a very smooth surface for this to work properly. Also too, recommended, if you're ever doing an engine with Cometic head gaskets, do not put coolant in it straight away and do not pressurize the system. Put the gaskets in, run the car, run the cam in if you've got a
Brand new
flat
motor.
tappet cam or anything like that, but run it with no pressure in it and just water. Let the gasket do its job and seal. If you get coolant in between it, it's never going to really seal properly, you know. So let it do its thing.
Let
with
it do
water.
some heat cycles.
Yeah, let it do some heat cycles. Once it's done a couple of heat cycles, then you can put coolant in it. Never recommend to put coolant with these straight away. Coolant's a funny thing. It tends to find its own way of working through gasket material, especially with these old engines. These old engines don't have modern style gaskets. A lot of them are paper, and as you know, with paper, it needs to seal properly, and as soon as it gets coolant in it, it'll leak forever.
Some of the really old motors that we have in the water system don't even have the paper gaskets. They've got leather gasket.
The leather gaskets in water pumps and stuff like that, and
so
sometimes
they take a little bit.
Yeah, but a lot of those old style water pumps, you can actually pull them apart and put a new seal in, because it's just basically a flat piece of leather. They cut it in a ring, put a hole in the centre, wedge it in there, and then just pack it with grease, and then they just tighten it up, and that's how they seal the water pumps.
So this car also, because we've put a sniper on it, the sniper helped us diagnose some underlying issues, because this head gasket wasn't blown directly into his oil. We didn't have cappuccino or latte looking oil.
No, the oil actually looked fine
we had-
when you pulled the dipstick, but even when you pulled this is the thing, you pulled the breather cap off, and even the breather cap looked fine. It wasn't until we actually took a rocker cover off and saw little driplets of water inside the rocker cover that confirmed that we had water in the engine oil.
But you did a leak sound test as well before then.
Well, compression test didn't pick it up.
No.
So even though it was leaking there, I only had 10 psi difference.
Yeah.
In that cylinder. So I went, we need to go further. We need to do a leak down test. Now, a leak down test is where you have the valves closed, you have the piston at top dead center, and you pressurise the system with air, and then it tells you whether it's leaking or not.
So we had the magically disappearing water in the radiator without a leak,
Yes.
basically. And
So it wasn't leaking on the ground.
I suspected driving behind Shane that it might be leaking out through the exhaust,
Yeah.
especially on this side port, but it was very, very faint. And it wasn't until you did the leak down test and those bubbles came up through the radiator and the water.
Yeah, it was only very slightly.
Yeah.
Very, very slightly. So you could actually drive quite a fair distance before you'd lose, say, a litre of water.
So it was a very, very subtle leak. But this car was suffering quite a bit of overheating issues, and a lot of that was to do with things we couldn't see until we removed the radiator
Well,
to
that's
replace
right. Well,
the fans.
We didn't realise they'd done a great job of making brackets, but the problem is there was no airflow around the brackets. The brackets were solid, so the problem is, yeah, it's great making a solid bracket to hold your transcooler and your air conditioner condenser, but at the same time, there's a radiator behind it that needs air.
So these brackets were blocking approximately a third
Yeah.
of the airflow through this radiator. And we removed the radiator because the single fan that he had actually blown, because it was working overtime trying to cool the radiator, because it wasn't getting the airflow, and that had buggered up his alternator.
Well, not only
And
that,
it was a case of chasing our tail until we found the initial issue that would have caused the overheating and caused the fan to fail, causing the alternator to fail. Once we fixed that and all the electricity, we weren't losing a volt anymore. Then we found these gaskets, which weren't right for the aluminium head, had also gone.
no, you can use them with aluminium heads, as I said before, but the problem is as soon as you start to exceed a certain amount of horsepower, they fail real easy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So that had happened here. So I think, hopefully, we've ticked all the boxes now, and all of his overheating issues should be stopped.
Yeah.
However,
like the engine build's a good engine build. Don't get me wrong. But it's high compression. So you need a controlled ignition, which it didn't have, which it has now.
so now
because
we've got the Hyperspark.
The Hyperspark. So the Hyperspark is a 3D ignition curve. So you can have it so you get great fuel economy when you're cruising down the road, but at the same time when you nail it, you can pull timing out in all different spots and add timing in where you can't do with a normal distributor. People think that a normal distributor is enough for building an engine. Yes, you'll get great power right up top, but what about when you're cruising? These cars are driven around as daily drivers sometimes, and you want to be able to have performance all the way through the power range, not just have it at say 6,000 RPM.
Yeah.
So these Hyperspark systems are fantastic because you can do those individual box tunes as you go up and down through the RPM to get that ideal ignition curve.
The other thing with the Sniper on it, once we put the Sniper on it, it actually helped us stop chasing our tail with this car because it overheated. He drove it, it overheated, and I had it set so that the Sniper would turn off as a safety.
The problem is with the gauges in these cars. The gauges in these cars are an estimation of how hot it is. So it doesn't say exactly in increments of what the temperature of the engine is. The reason why they do that is because the gauges aren't accurate. So what's been done to this is we've now got the Sniper controlling the fans and telling us exactly what the temperature is.
And it has a fail safe on it. So if it does get too hot, we can either turn down the timing or we can shut it off until it drops below a certain temperature to protect the engine. Yeah. The other thing the Sniper also allowed was for us to diagnose that fan because it showed us that it was pulling a full volt out every time the fan turned on.
Yeah, which was an issue. We thought maybe it was a relay issue or something like that, but when the car came to us, one of the relays was actually blown and wasn't working. So obviously it had been overloaded for the other fan. And then when I gave the fan to one of our electrician mates, and he checked it out and said, no, the fan's buggered.
Yeah.
So it was just drawing too much current.
Yeah, so it was still working, but it wasn't sucking enough air and it was taking too much current out of the system.
So with these twin fans here are set up so when you're cruising down the road at say 100 k's an hour, they actually stop working because obviously the radiator takes over and the airflow through the radiator works. But also these little flaps, see these little rubber flaps? They blow open and allow the air to go all the way around and not have to just rely on pulling through these fan holes. These fans are fantastic. I've got these fans on many of my cars, and they're very, very efficient. They use very small amount of power to run them. But at the same time, when you're cruising down the road, you don't want your fans on a hot day. You only just, say as an example, if you've got the air conditioning running, you want one fan running all the time, not two.
So a hot day like it was yesterday where it was 37 degrees, not like today in case you can't hear the rain and maybe 21 degrees. Welcome to Melbourne. So you've just got to finish putting these heads back on, bolt it all back together, and we should be sweet. Fantastic. Till next time. See ya. If you like this video, don't forget to click like and leave a comment. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe and click the notification bell. If you like the t-shirts that you see the crew wearing, there's a link in the description below where you can grab some for yourself. Thanks for watching.